am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Wars. Prepare for Prattle.
Welcome to Page of Apocalypse, a chronicling of every chapter of the 90s X-Men comic book event of biblical proportions, the Age of Apocalypse. I'm your co-host, the ever uncanny, ever astonishing Spider-Dan. But before I introduce my comics emotion compatriots, I wanted to say Happy Pride Month, everyone. The X-Men were originally created to reflect marginalised groups and the bigotry they face daily. The X-Men have always been relatable, but no group has embraced what they represent more than the LGBTQIA+ community, who love these characters with a fiery passion. Before we start, I wanted to acknowledge that there are two shape-shifting characters in this miniseries and the next one, who in recent years have been considered or characterized as non-binary and intersex. Though, due to these books being 30 years of age, these were not terms that were used or even considered at the time. However, we will be trying to use the current pronouns and the correct terms for these characters. If we do misgender them, please forgive us. This is not intentional or out of spite. It will be purely down to forgetfulness, old age, and neurodivergency. If we do catch it, we will endeavour to correct ourselves. The X-Men are for everyone and should be enjoyed by everyone. And you've waited long enough for them, so let me introduce a new father-to-be who questions whether the X-Men should even bother saving baby Charles from the clutches of a mad despot. It's Max Byrne.
Hey Dan. Hey Dave. It's great to be back again to talk more X-Men, more apocalyptic misery, which is a welcome break from the apocalyptic misery we're living in, but hey-ho.
We'll get there, I'm sure. We'll get there, but yes. And Dave Horrocks, who loves his sci-fi space operas as long as they don't feature sexy avian aliens who have a thing for weird, bald blokes.
My sheer disdain. You're right, and at some point I will find the magic formula. But yeah, I'm with Max. I think I prefer my dystopia in fiction. So get less of it in my life. But yeah, no, great to come back and talk to you about some X-Men. It's always good fun.
Yes, we do need an escape from everything that's going on at the moment. There is a lot going on, and this book is topical in a lot of ways. We'll be looking today at Astonishing X-Men 1995, the first comic book to have this title, but many more have had that title since then. And it features a script from written by Scott Lobdell, and the art is by Joe Madureira. I want to pronounce it that way. And yes, it is a Rogue's team. Rogue is leading this team, so we've gone from Gambit over to Rogue. And her X-Men team's mission of choice is to stop Holocaust, the genocidal son of Apocalypse, who was pretty much almost killed by Magneto in some prequel comics we'll get to at some point, and he is here trying to undo the what was it, the Kelly Pact they called it, which was all like, can you please stop doing genocide, Apocalypse, please? And of course he's let Holocaust go and live out his name. So yes, another book with a very 90s art style. One of the better artists, in my opinion, I think, that was working on this event. But let's go over to Max. Max, tell us. Well, actually, what am I doing? How rude of me. Dave, surely you have a synopsis ready for us, as per usual.
Well, I do. Funnily enough, you should say that. I was just going to shed a tear as I disappeared into the background.
I completely forgot. I'm still very tired from Forbidden Worlds. I know that was feels like 2 weeks ago now, but I do apologise.
That is quite all right.
I'm forgetting the format. I'm all over the show, but yeah, please, Dave, please regale us.
I will say, just doing these has had an influence. So this podcast has had an influence over the VHS Strikes Back. So we've started doing our own trailers, and it was actually just doing this, and I thought, plus all the copyright strikes we were getting for the trailers, that meant we had to come up with a solution, and so the homemade trailers are the solution we came up with. So here we go. And I thought I was using Inner World as a crutch, and I know that was kind of by design, but I've gone a different route this time.
Okay.
They thought they could silence the dream, but the fight had only just begun. From the ashes of a shattered timeline, where apocalypse rules with mutant might and humanity is on the brink of extinction, one team refuses to kneel. Rogue, the unstoppable warrior with the power of 100 foes. Sabretooth, once a predator, now a protector. Sunfire, a living inferno with a vendetta to burn. Morph can be anything except silent. Blink, fast, fierce, and teleporting straight through to the front lines. Their mission, take down Apocalypse's most brutal enforcer, Holocaust. He's 9 feet tall, radiation fueled, and he's just getting warmed up. 1 strike team, 5 warriors, 0 room for error. There you go.
Bravo.
Excellent. Another one. You were really going for this one this week.
I
felt you were living that. You were in there.
Yeah.
You're in amongst.
Go for it, haven't you? You know, it's.
Yeah, got to give it both barrels. You relax. Now we've got to go over to the Big Daddy himself, Max Byrne. Let's hear what your thoughts are on Astonishing X-Men.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. For me, this is, of the ones we've covered so far, this is the one I enjoyed the most. Gambit in the externals was very sort of planet hopping and cosmic-y bollocksy, and Weapon X was jumping all over the shop. 1 minute they're in London, 1 minute they're on the White Cliffs of Dover, 1 minute they're back in America. Whereas this one is just sort of straightforward, balls to the wall, not much nuance, but there is a little bit here and there, which we'll get to. Just really good. The best villain as well, I think, so far from the 3 and a bit arcs we've done. The most formidable foe, really, really worthy adversary as well. And it's just a lot of fun. I've got my minor things I don't like about it. Morph really straddles a fine line between being funny and being irritating as shit. Very much like Deadpool. He's very much like Deadpool in that regard, in my taste.
Very, very cartoony, very like Looney Tunes kind of character. Morph is, I think.
Yeah, Morph. They are. They're very much like that. But it doesn't mean that there's not some really good stuff with Morph in there. But yeah, I think overall it's a really enjoyable 4-issue arc. It doesn't demand so much from the reader, as you can just pick it up and go with it, and it's just always moving forward. I really enjoyed it, yeah.
Cool. Dave, what did you feel to this? Given what we've read before, what we've had, how did you find this one?
So I enjoyed this one a little bit less, I have to say. I'm curious to get more, because sometimes when you read things in isolation, you don't necessarily digest it properly, and I think maybe I was getting a bit used to the formula, like the way we're reading this. We've read kind of Alpha and whatever, the whole prelude, and then we're hopping from miniseries to miniseries, and so I don't know if I'm starting to get a bit jaded with that. Maybe that was playing into it. So like issue 1, okay, let's get all the team together, let's set out the mission. It just felt a little bit formulaic. And it seems inappropriate to beat up on Morph, but actually the character I thought about was Slapstick. I don't know if you remember from Secret Invasion. And it just seems, like you say, like this Looney Tunes character, a little bit like my same aversion to, say, the Shi'ar. I think if I think of the X-Men, I think, about a particular, my favourite X-Men are, take a human being and just change one thing about them. Let's forget the secondary mutations and everything that came later, but change one thing and make that extraordinary. And then, it gets into space. It's like it's playing. I've got them in a box kind of over here mentally, and so I get grumpy if they go out the box. But having the Looney Tunes stuff, I don't feel like it worked for me, because again, it was a bit of that Deadpool ramped up to 11 kind of thing, and so I think it contrasts against if I'm reading an apocalyptic story, it just jars with me a bit to have the slapstick in there.
I know what you mean. I mean, this story and this villain are very like, and Apocalypse as well. Like they double down on the kind of evil villainy and the talk of racial impurity and flat scan humans and like you're not our superior, we are your superior, and it is the story is basically one big culling. That's the mission of Holocaust is to create this cull. And the kind of dialogue, and it is very tense, and there's some really somber moments, real somber character moments in this. I'd say, for me, it's less about the plot in this. It's more about the action, and it's more about the kind of introspection into the characters and what's going on for them. I was saying this to Max as well. I think another thing that you mentioned there was that, it's laying the table. It's like, right, where are we? What's the mission? What will they do? What do they need to accomplish? And because this was the main X-Men book, this is Uncanny X-Men, so this is the main title. So I think, and on the Marvel Unlimited suggested reading order, they have a suggested reading order because there is no real reading order. After X-Men Alpha, this comes in. And I feel like this is the one you do read. I know we're reading them out of order, and you can read them out of order, but I think this one is still setting up that table more so than the other books have done, more so than Weapon X or Gambit and the Externals.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because
Gambit hasn't even gone off on his mission yet.
Exactly. So I think is what they're doing here is they're going, this is a mission. Here's Gambit. Here's Nightcrawler. Here's this. Here's Quicksilver and Storm's team. Here's this. So, and they're still also referencing all the other books, even if you don't see the characters like Colossus and Shadowcat in Generation Next. So I think it is still going, this is where the kind of main story will be, but there's all this other stuff going on. You've got to try and keep up with it. So I think it is selling as well, selling those books, but also kind of just saying this is what the event's going to be, this is what's going to be. The missions are set at the beginning, then they go off and do the missions. Do they accomplish them? Yes or no? And then we lead into X-Men Omega, which will be the finale. And we'll leave these characters here for now, but they'll all meet up in that final issue. So I think it is important for what it is, and I think it is good. But I get what you mean, Dave, about it being formulaic, because we've had it now. What is it? This is our fourth one, I think, now. So our fifth one. So yeah, we're seeing that a lot. But again, it kind of needs to do it. I think it needs to happen, or we would have needed it in X-Men Alpha, I think. And I think that's why we get a bit of Gambit and a bit of Nightcrawler, a bit of this, a bit of that. So I don't mind that, and I think there's some really good stuff. And like I said last week to Max, he was like, why would they save Baby Charles if they're going to erase reality anyway? And I was like, well, it's real to them, damn it, it's real to them. That's their world, it's their babies, And that's exactly what Quicksilver says to Bishop. He goes, this is a cosmic accident. And there's this beautiful scene, I think, in the second issue where Bishop thinks Magneto is off hiding while all of his X-Men are sacrificing their lives. They're up against a threat they can't possibly win, can't possibly beat Holocaust by themselves, all 5 of them, and they're not the most powerful of mutants combined. But actually he's saying goodbye to Baby Charles, because he was like, he says love is not an accident. I thought that was a really beautiful moment. He's holding him. He's like, this might be the final moment I see my child and get to say goodbye, because I'm going to have to undo reality. And that's what he's telling the X-Men. He's so conflicted in these early issues about what he has to do. He knows he has to do. He promised, he swore to Charles he would make a better world, and he'll do that even if he has to sacrifice everyone he loves, everything he's ever known. And I think, and Bishop is like this weird outsider that's kind of angry and weird and crazy. And again, Quicksilver says, and he's, he has this wonderful kind of goodbye with Rogue, because again, all these characters, this may well be the last time they see any of them, because if they don't undo reality, if they don't hit the reset button, this is probably the end of their world as they know it.
Yeah, it's either they're going to have to say goodbye because this reality wants this, or they're saying goodbye because they're just going to get killed anyway. on the mission. So either way, it's goodbye, isn't it?
Yeah. Or like I said in the previous podcast, reality could still continue. So this reality, even though they've stopped the main 616 universe from, failing and being crystallized by the Shi'ar Emkron crystal wave or whatever it is, this reality could continue on, and they've got to try and make the best of it. But the best way to save their world effectively, or reset that other world, is to sacrifice themselves and accomplish their goals that they need to. So yeah, I think the strongest issues for me, I think, are the first two, and it is more about the characters and where they are and what they're going to do and what their histories are. Like I love Sabretooth being this, almost like a Wolverine-like character. He's a savage. They completely flip it. Like Wolverine almost gets more evil in his book, but Sabretooth becomes this like protective father, and you see him Blink's earliest memory is her being rescued by Logan and Victor, and he just adopts this wonderful character, and he has Wild Child on a leash kind of thing, which is bizarre, a bit weird, maybe a bit kinky, I don't know, but and I love that moment where he kind of sets him off, and he just kind of he goes up against this juggernaut of Holocaust who has all these powers, this life support armor, like you said, 9 feet tall, massive. He's the son of Apocalypse. Say what you will, but that counts for something. And Magneto was able to harm him but not kill him. And even Sabretooth thinks he kills him in this issue, in this first or second issue. But he comes back because he's just like pure aggression and hatred. And Sabretooth's like poking holes in the kind of the survival of the fittest as well. He's like, yeah, you're not really, you've stacked the deck in your favor. It's not really survival of the fittest, is it? And Holocaust is like, I don't care about that anymore. I don't want to. He's not going to give me. I'm the heir to Apocalypse, but he's not going to give me his throne. It's down to me to make the world as I see it. And he basically says, I'm going to make the world completely unlivable for anybody because I'm now in this suit, so I can survive whatever fiery apocalypse I make of the planet. I'll survive it because I'm basically unkillable. I have to agree with Max. I think I enjoyed this one. Again, it's not got a lot of twists and turns. We're not moving about. We're not going to galaxies. We're not doing several different missions in several different countries. It's just stop the culling. That's it. One drive, one goal, and there's not many twists and turns. But I think for me, it's all about the character and the action are what are the strongest elements of these issues.
I think maybe for me, part of why I couldn't fully buy into it, and like I said, loving the chat, and it will make me probably reconsider and think, oh yeah, I see it that way, but the team itself, I mean, you say this is the main book, but it's not a team that I recognise or can get behind. What you said about Sabretooth is bang on as well. At first I'm like, oh yeah, I know Sabretooth, he's supposed to be a goodie here, but yeah, I'm not really buying it. I mean, he's a despicable character, isn't he, in 616? But I couldn't help myself to get sucked into it. He was so noble, and he basically, like you say, he was Wolverine, but probably a better version. He didn't put a foot wrong at all.
No.
But then you got Blink, who's a sort of new character, and then Sunfire. I mean, I'll take you back right to 1986. This was where my love of the X-Men was born, and I was just going through, remember when you could just walk into the newsagents and they had a row of comics there, and I was just looking for something to buy, and I saw this Art Adams, I didn't know it was Art Adams at the time, but Classic X-Men #1, and you had this fantastic image and all these characters bursting out of the front cover, and I was like, what is that? I didn't know at the time that was a reprint of Giant Size, and that was where my love of the X-Men was born. I was just like, oh, I love this team, and like all these characters, and this guy with claws coming out of his hands, like, wow, and I was like, fuck, Superman and Spider-Man and everything. No, it's like, who are these? I need to know more. But what the other thought I had at that time was, this Sunfire is a dick.
Yes.
He is a proper dick, and my perception has never really wavered too far from that. I just think he's a knob. But what I loved, to be fair, out of this miniseries was his like seething rage underneath the surface. But it wasn't just because he was a dick because he's a dick. He had a reason for it as well. So I have to say, I wasn't fully bought into the team. They weren't characters that I recognised, or not recognised, but recognised being part of the team. Apart from Rogue, but there were definitely elements.
Yeah, Blink is new. Morph was inspired by the animated series version of the character, because before that, Morph was Changeling, who sacrificed themselves to because they were impersonating Professor X. And for a long time, Professor X was thought dead because Changeling had died in Xavier's place. So it's a kind of combination of both of those. I do like when Quicksilver has this very like, oh father, we're all going to die, I love you, and this might be our only chance to say goodbye, and then Morph reveals themselves to and
with
gives
giant lips.
gives Quicksilver this big sloppy kiss. I was like, that's brilliant. But then after that, they reference his original. They reference their original outfit. With the big purple headpiece when Morph or Changeling was a villain. So I appreciate that little nod to the character, to canon as well. I get what you mean. Like, it is a kind of an oddball group, but I kind of like when I'm not a big fan of when like the Justice League is at its most powerful. It does not interest me. If you've got Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, they're all great characters, and I don't mind seeing them together. But I'd rather, I'm the guy who likes the kind of off-kilter characters, the weird ones, the ones you can actually tell more stories with, that you can play around with a bit more. You have more flexibility. That's why I always like. So when there's always like a roster of those characters, like in the early days when Vision and Hawkeye were on the team, they don't have their own books, so you can play fast and loose with their storylines in the Avengers, and things like that. But I have to agree. Sunfire is a dick, but I've always kind of had a soft spot for Sunfire. And it's quite. I think the storyline here, I think his redesign is probably the best he's ever looked, and I love his original costume.
Amazing, doesn't he?
I love his original costume anyway. And they actually, he did become a Horseman of Apocalypse in the main continuity because Lady Deathstrike cut his legs off, and then Rogue had permanently absorbed his powers at that point. So he couldn't walk, and he didn't have his powers anymore. So Apocalypse came to him and said, "I can remake you," and he remakes him, and he gives him the Salvador Larroca, who we had in the artist in the last issue. He redesigned him and again brought back this look. And I love the body is burnt as well, like underneath the fire, he's actually like burnt. And what's really interesting as well is if you know the origin of Sunfire, his mum was caught in the nuclear blast at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's why he was born a mutant, because she was irradiated, or he was irradiated while in the womb. And the fact that Holocaust has destroyed, and Apocalypse have destroyed all of Japan, and that scene where not only his family but the whole, like, that is a complete genocide, a Holocaust of Japan, and then he's drowned in the blood of his family and his fellow people. That imagery is so fucking bleak and shocking and like devastating, and I love that moment where we're seeing this through Rogue's eyes, because he's going ape shit, because he's like, it's happening again, and he's trying to stop these drones, but he's actually harming the humans as well. So Rogue has to absorb his powers and calm him down, but then she relives that, and he says, "That's my pain, that's my shame, how dare you take that from me, that's only for me, that's for me to hold on to." And she was like, "If I'd known, I would have said it was never your fault, all of this."
There's a real tragic quality to him, isn't there?
Yeah,
hugely tragic, and it gives you so much sympathy for him as well, and makes him by default more likable.
Exactly, yeah. He's still in the original books, like Dave has said, he was very much like the dick on the team, which is why they basically like get rid of him immediately, because he's very much like, he's a stand for Japan, let's say. He will do he's like Captain America in Japan, basically, for so many ways. He was the leader of the Big Hero 6 in Japan in the original comics. They obviously didn't use him in the movie, but that was the idea originally. And yeah, so that makes sense that he is a bit of a dick, and he's like, no, I'm not going to save the Western world. I'm going to protect Japan because that's my world. So yeah, I've always had a kind of a soft spot for the character. I even like the mask, the original kind of starfish mask or whatever he's got going on. I've always dug that. So yeah, I've got a soft spot, but I think one of the stronger parts of the book is definitely Sunfire in this one.
I think the older and grumpier I get, I probably should revisit my idea of Sunfire. I think I'm growing into Sunfire, but
the rage boils within us all. Let out the fiery rage.
He just doesn't give a fuck, does he? I mean, he just like, oh, you lot are doing that.
He almost kills the X-Men when he crashes through, because they're at Blink and him are trying to escape this prelate who is Delgado, I think the character's name, and who's one of the acolytes of Magneto in the main continuity. And he's again, the fires are raging, and it's like, will you calm down, like, and he's burning everyone, and Iceman has to apply some moisture, and Magneto creates this big fist and grabs him out of the floor of the mansion.
That's so cool, that image as well.
I love that imagery. Yeah. And we get a lot of that imagery with Morph as well, with the various forms that Morph takes. Things like a giant brick or a whale, or when he's told, when they're told to zip it. There's a big zip comes over Morph's face. So yeah, like some wonderful like cartoon imagery. Again, I do kind of agree with Dave. The comedy doesn't always land for me, because I think it's such a serious tale and there's so much tragedy. I think it's hard for those moments to add levity. And I think there's a lot of like references Morph makes that I'm not sure would play, or maybe could have occurred in a world like this, like talking about old TV shows and stuff like that. I'm not sure.
I think he kind of just takes away from the stakes of the situation, doesn't he? His humour's okay, but I just think there's too much of it. Even that even has the last word in the entire book, where after they're all stood in that sort of iconic pose, and Rogue says, "Today is the end of the age of apocalypse, no matter what happens." And then he has like some really silly little aside that comes after it. I can't remember what he says now. Something like, "Is it or isn't it?" Or did I? It's just
almost like
it overdoes the tragedy by having this guy. Sorry, by having them just being silly too much, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's the classic Marvel thing of in the Marvel movies. There's a complaint where you have a really serious, poignant moment, and they undercut it with a crap joke, or a pun, or a gag or something.
The world's literally at stake, but we've got time for a one-liner. You wouldn't, would you?
No, I do. I really liked the moment though, because there's the final issue. Morph is making so many gags and jokes. There's this moment where Rogue takes Morph's powers and impersonates Morph to get close to Holocaust, and then Rogue sucker punches Holocaust, only for Holocaust to sucker punch her. And then Morph goes over to try and stir Rogue, and they take the form of baby Charles to stir Rogue, and that's the only person that would motivate Rogue in that moment. And I thought that was a really touching, kind of sweet moment to rally and get the cavalry coming in towards the end. I thought that was a really sweet and touching moment. After all the kind of silly gags and jokes, I was like, that works for me. That works.
I mean, for all the silliness, they do highlight just how powerful Morph is. I mean, not only can they take on the appearance, they take on the abilities and the functions of whatever they turn into. So there's literally nothing that Morph cannot do, really. They're in some ways, they're all powerful, because they can literally be whomever and whatever. We Morph did in the animated show, didn't he? X-Men 97 turned into the Hulk, and was as strong as the Hulk. I think he turned into Reed Richards in one episode as well. Sorry, they turned into Reed Richards.
Yeah, they did.
They did his power. So there's literally this. Despite the silliness, this book really does showcase just what Morph does bring when they're not being daft to the team. Into they can do literally anything you want them to do.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people, and let's forget the post. Was it 2014 when Deadpool came out, or it was sometime around then, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so,
I think so. Yeah.
I think before that, when he was just a comic book character and people didn't recognise Deadpool as the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool, he was quite a divisive character because he was just so damn silly in a lot of the things. So in his own book, but also if he appears in team books. And Uncanny X-Force is the best run where I've seen they get it just right. You know, he's still himself, and you know, still a bit wacky and a bit crazy, but not the slapstick stuff. And I think it was Rick Remender, wasn't it, who wrote that run? And I think for me, Morph just maybe needed bringing down a little bit. But also, I think part of the problem is maybe my expectations, because the other challenge I have with this book is just how clean everything is, all the colouring, all of the art style. Because of the subject matter, I kind of want some dirty, painted, Clayton Crane sort of artwork, and maybe that's just looking at it with revisionist eyes, you know, so that obviously came in the future. But I feel like because we get Morph doing the over-the-top slapstick, and we also get these clean, almost cartoon-type images coloured in, I think for me, that again, I think that jars with me with the really serious underlying themes with this all, but it kind of almost is an extension of the animated series.
Yeah, it's very anime inspired, the art. I like it. I think the colouring it really pops. It you know, I remember the art style. If you remember the Marvel superheroes Capcom game, the promotional art is from Madureira, and it's gorgeous. So I love it. But yeah, I somewhat agree. Again, this comedy and somewhat. But I don't mind it, because I think even if we go to anime, there are some really dark and disturbing, you know, anime pictures out there, like Akira, for example. But that's full of colour. That's so colourful as well. Like, even, you know, the red jacket, the lights on the bike, the red bike. You know, there's so much colour in there. So I think it is possible. But I get the criticism. But I don't think, for me, considering the artwork we got last month on the last podcast, half of that was pretty poor. Like, this is a masterclass in comparison to those first two issues of Gambit and the Externals for me.
The action is really well drawn. When there's a lot of like clubbing blows being rained down on characters in this, particularly with Holocaust and Sabretooth, or Holocaust and Rogue, swapping anyone else versus Holocaust. But every time a punch lands, there's a visceral quality to the art. It jumps off the page.
Kinetic, isn't it?
Yeah, very kinetic. Yeah, it's really involving.
You can feel the mood. Like, it's a still image, but you can feel those blows. You can feel that, and I think that's what I enjoy as well. And the raw physicality of it as well. Like, again, it's cartoony. There's a cartoony vibe to it, but there's a modern edge. There's a 90s edge. There's an anime vibe. It comes together for me, and he's coming back as well, Madureira, to do the variant covers for the current 2025 Age of Apocalypse book, which I'm really looking forward to. They've released one so far, which is Wolverine popping both sets of claws. It looks absolutely. It doesn't look like his work. He's aged like a fine wine, this artist, for me. He's absolutely nailing it. Still, like, to a high quality. When you look at people like, you know, Frank Miller, who's just declined in quality, mentally, physically, and with his politically, and with his art as well.
The only 60-odd-year-old man who looks 100.
I remember seeing him next to Stan Lee a few years ago when Stan was still alive, and I was like, who is that? Who is that next to him? It must be somebody who's like from, it must be like Will Eisner or somebody. I was like, no, it's Frank Miller.
You would have thought he was the 90-odd-year-old at the time, not Stan Lee.
Exactly. Yeah, but I'm on board with the art, but I can understand the criticisms. Max, you were talking about Holocaust as a villain, like being the best villain. Why don't you tell us more about that? Why do you feel that about this antagonist?
Well, I just think he's superb. I mean, this villain is, unless I'm wrong, is native to this timeline. It wasn't in the pre-existing continuity before this continuity. So this is special for this book, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is the debut, technically the debut of this. Again, we've seen him before, but obviously the first appearance can be a bit wobbly with this event because of all the books coming out at the same time in different weeks and what have you. But yes, this is his first full-on appearance in a Marvel comic as an original creation. Never been seen before, never been, however, proved popular enough that he would go on for further appearances past this.
Well, rightly so. I think it's just a really good villain. He's deliciously arch, completely unrepentant and unapologetically evil. There's no shade of grey there. He is just awful. And he's kind of like the T-1000 from Terminator 2 in that he can take whatever you throw at him and just keep coming back for more. I mean, in this book, despite his own physical gifts, he does get a good beating from Sabretooth, he does get a good beating from Rogue, but yet he just keeps coming back. You think you've got him. Sabretooth rips his head off, his helmet off at least, and he just reconstitutes himself. There's a scene where Blink opens up a bottle and dips him in his own genetic stew, I think it's called, and you think, oh, that's the end of him then. That's like a he'll come out like looking like the guy out of RoboCop or something like that,
Kill me!
But he literally he comes out looking brand new.
It's the same,
He's just a really, really good villain and really involving, and the more I see of him, the more I want to see of him, if that makes sense.
I love that you can see his like skeletal energy form underneath the armor. Like he's not fully covered. It's kind of translucent, transparent.
He's a bit like I can't really pronounce it, Chemo or Chemo, the DC villain. It's very similar to that in a way, but obviously a lot harder edged and a bit less pantomime.
I can see that though. It's less chemicals and more like radiation or an energy form, isn't it? Yeah. I'm not sure about the meteorite kind of shooty arm he has, the gun thing. I'm not sure about that, whether I like that or whether I'd like it more to be a more conventional gun arm or something, or a claw or something. But again, I think that's the more cartoony edge of the artwork for me. But yeah, I miss villains that are just fucking evil. I really do.
Just it's got to be shades
of grey.
It's got to be like, he did this, and the system fucked him up, and that, and like, I don't mind a villain that you agree with, but we always, like, we talked about it, and when me and Tonya and Andy did the Batman, like, you're behind the Riddler almost the entire way through the film. You're like, actually, he's killing criminals. He's killing the corrupt politicians who ruined everybody's life, ruined Gotham. But then right at the end, he just goes, let's kill innocent people because I can't be the good guy. So
exactly, not everyone should be Magneto,
Yeah.
Well, what changed that? Because my theory is it's Wicked, with the whole Wicked Witch of the West.
Yeah, maybe. I was going to say, I think Black Panther is the one that did, like, because loads of people came out saying Killmonger is great, what a great villain. But again, he does the same thing. We get to a point where he just goes, there's no real reason for that character to do that where they are. They just go, murder. Just murder. So I want, like, it's the same with like you said, the Disney villains. It's the same issue. It's the mystery villain, or it's the villain who's not quite all that bad, or they wait right until the end. Like I miss the real ones like Ursula and Captain Hook and Hades. They're bad from the get go. The designs are saying these guys are not good. And I like characters like Mr. Hyde in the Marvel universe. He's just like, and then Sabretooth, for example, is a great example. Like, just fucking nothing redeeming about them. They're just pure fucking evil, which I find is really interesting because in the main universe, in the main universe, the end of Wolverine, before we go into Weapon X, he is stabbed in the brain by Wolverine just before the Shi'ar crystal wave hits. He is stabbed directly in the brain. potentially killing him. Like, what a cliffhanger for that book. You've got four issues of Age of Apocalypse before you even get back to that. But yeah, I want a return of those kind of villains, like formidable, pure evil. Speaking of pure evil, you know how I love a good Apocalypse appearance in any of these books. The fact that we see him, the cullings have begun again, and Rex, his kind of handyman or second in command, runs it. He's basically the guy he needs to speak to get all of his ideas out. Rex is kind of a device. He's an original character as well, but he is sat there, and he's like, "What's that smell, my lord?" And he's like, "Oh, just the remains of humans that I love sitting on and smelling. I love the smell of freshly burnt corpses in the morning." I was like, and he's like, "Have we got the location of the X-Men's base yet?" "Not soon, my lord, soon." And he's like, "What's wrong, lord? What's wrong?" And he's like, "Nothing. It's a smile." And he's like, he's having a whale of a time, just fucking murdering people and being pure evil. And I again am here for it.
Yeah. Just going back very, very quickly to Holocaust, there's one bit in it that is probably the worst writing in this book by a mile, and if not so, we've been through this whole journey so far. And it's when he's fighting Sabretooth, and he just does something pure. It's pure Bond villain 101, where he literally says, "Since you're going to die anyway, I'm going to tell you where my processing plant is." And he says this is information you'll be taking to your grave, sir. And no, you just not. Anyone who's a villain knows you don't divulge your plan until.
Wonderful.
No, it's great in a way, but it's like, oh come on, that's like that's so 60s Bond villain,
This is pre Austin Powers, isn't it? This is pre where they call out that Bond trope.
Yeah.
When was Austin Powers the
About
first one?
97, I think.
Yeah, 98. 97.
So that was where they called it out. I could just kill you, bang. No, I am just going to set up this elaborate scheme, and I am going to assume that you are going to die from it. So
I'm going to tell you everything.
Yeah,
that you can then use
because you're
going
to be dead, so you can't tell anyone. So I might as well just do an exposition dump, and then you can't do anything with that information. Oh wait, you foiled it me again. But I just wanted to say with Holocaust as well, so the Grant Morrison run, obviously, again, another divisive thing, but Glob Herman.
Yes.
Everyone
Good
thought,
shout.
"Oh wow,
Good shout.
what an original character." And kind of looking at this character design, I'm like, "Oh, this was way before Glob Herman," and but it's kind of like him. So, I mean, I've got to assume he must have been at least influenced, But
yeah, maybe.
At the time, I mean, for years I've thought Glob Herman was just this completely fresh, like weird and wacky character. But
we're living in a postmodern world, Dave. Nothing's original anymore.
It's very,
Everyone
very
mix
similar.
up everybody, just like in music.
So I wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to the plot. So Max was talking about the infinite plant. So what they're doing is Holocaust is culling Chicago. I think they're in.
Yeah.
And they're killing all these humans, and they're taking the remains to be used in this kind of genetic stew, as Max said, to create these infinites. So again, the soldiers that we've been talking about, the kind of foot soldiers that the Apocalypse use, is kind of like the pawns that they send off. So they're not like the elite soldiers, they're just the kind of like genetic mush. And there's like a really intense scene where there's these humans that are behind this like chain link fence, and there's one that's like just had their head like blown off, and there's blood everywhere, and they're just like, we're just going to shoot them all. That's what we're programmed to do. This is what we're going to do. And they're scrambling, trying to claw up this wall and stuff. And then one of the X-Men comes in, I think it's Rogue or somebody, and comes and saves them. But yeah, like some of that imagery. But the idea is that not only have they got to stop the culling, they now know that this is where Apocalypse gets most of his soldiers from. So they've got to destroy the plant on top of that and stop a Holocaust if they can. With the number that they have and their power set, can they do it? I wanted to talk a little bit about Blink because we don't get much of her kind of character, but we know she doesn't like fucking Gambit for a start. We know she absolutely despises Gambit, because Rogue, he comes to say goodbye to Rogue because he's been given the mission by Magneto that we saw in the last podcast, and he basically is there to say goodbye because this is the last time they'll ever see each other. And Blink's like, I can't believe you're here, can't believe you're doing this, and while they're getting closer and closer, having this private moment, and then Blink brings Baby Charles out and goes, oh, Baby Charles is here, distraction, just as they're like about to share a kiss or something. And yeah, Blink's like, yeah, get the fuck out, Gambit, leave, get out. But yeah, it was I what I love about Blink is the use of her powers is really interesting. Like, we have Nightcrawler who can teleport, but her powers are more like spatial displacement almost. Like, she can throw these knives that, and you see that wonderfully portrayed in Days of Futures Past. She's in that when they're fighting the Sentinels at the beginning.
Amazing.
It's like opening up a wormhole, isn't it, to another
pretty
place.
much, yeah. And she can, she can fight like, vertically and horizontally, and and I love just the use of her powers. Like, she chops Delgado in half. She's like, see ya. Chops the guy. He's like, what? Like, there's some bad writing there because he's like, oh, I'm still in the portal. What will happen when this portal closes? And she's like, that's why I said see ya, and then cuts him in half. We don't see the body. We don't see the body, the half of the body, or it just gets kind of munched in the portal. But yeah, I think such not an original character technically. There was a 616 version who died during the Phalanx Covenant, but I think that's why they brought her back, because they were like, well, she didn't exist in that reality. What if she was one of the main X-Men? And she goes on to be very, very popular. And there's I think in the 616 version they bring back the 616 version as well. They resurrect her through Necrotia X or X Necrotia, I think, that storyline with Selene. So yeah, like, yeah, so
that. I've read it. But...
Yeah, she's in the New Mutants line because X-Man joins that team as well at one point. And we have some interactions between them, kind of, because he sort of remembers her, I think, from the Age of Apocalypse, but doesn't quite know her. So I think, again, we don't get much to know it. We just know that she's kind of she's a Kitty Pryde to Sabretooth to Wolverine kind of thing, or Jubilee, let's say. But I think that's all you kind of need to know, really, at this point, anyway.
I mean, I think I know why she's popular.
Okay, Dave. Okay. Let's
face it, she's a reimagining of the Spot, isn't she? She's the old Spider-Man.
Are you saying the Spot is popular?
Well, no. So the Spot is absolutely not popular. But if you think about the kind of powers, we talk about everything being influenced by everything else. So. And there was probably someone before him, but the Spot is kind of who I think of if I think about this power set. And she is kind of interesting. And funnily enough, I remember this must have been late 2000s or something, and just bought a box of X-Men comics from eBay for 20 quid. And there must have been 200 books in there. Loads of stuff, like all the Deadly Genesis was in there, and Blink 1 to 4. So this miniseries was after this, and I was like, who the fuck's Blink? But whoever I bought it off was clearly a mad X-Men fan and had just fallen on hard times. But can you imagine that now? Like, ordering that many, a box full of comics for 20 quid.
Random comics, yeah.
Random, mostly X-Men comics, but yeah. So, what struck me about this? I mean, let's face it. In the mid-90s, if you wanted a bit of happy time, right, you had to either check out the Little Woods catalogue, check out, some cheesecake in the comics.
Are we going back to Legion's mum again? Is this what's going?
But scout about the woods and see if someone's tried to hide their razzle.
Scout about the woods. Jesus Christ!
No. See, you don't get that anymore, do you? When you got all access to everything on the internet, you just stumbling across the woods.
Don't know the Bond.
They don't have to.
Oh my God! Look at that! Someone
stumble into the woods.
Mag.
Jazz mag in a cabin in the woods.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
It's just stuck. But honestly, every panel, and again, it's hard. Like, no pun intended, but every single panel that Blink is in, she's sexualized. Like you've got that elven look, but everything is
it's
drawn,
got kind of a
so
bow and arrow kind of thing going on, hasn't she? Where she keeps her things.
They've just really lent, and I found it really distracting. You know, they basically, there is literally not a single panel that I could see where she's not like in a superhero pose, where she's got, you know, a bit of cloth hiding her modesty, but you can see like the signs of her bum cheeks and stuff.
There was
That's
one
very 90s comics, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's not just comics. I think it's like, think about all the films you've tackled on the VHS or, you know, Canon films. They're all exactly. You know, and how many lurid comments has Chris made about all the women in the films you've watched? You know.
By the way, Love Island's starting soon.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry. Don't want to distract you from that. And yeah. But no, I agree that I think it's not just a comic book problem. It's just a systemic societal issue. But there was one very small panel of Rogue, and then for some reason it's like a small. I'll put it up on the screen, but it's this really small panel. But all of a sudden, her boobs are like absolutely like bunched up for no reason directly above the board of the panel.
But to be fair, we're not getting Savage Land Rogue. You know, she's kind of got the full costume on, but
modest.
I feel like Rogue was sort of toned down, but Blink was ramped up.
Yeah.
You know,
No, I agree.
And like I say, it's clear to me why she was so popular.
Yeah. No. Well, there you go. But maybe there's something to that. You know, I think there's something to be said for that. But yeah, I think again, it's just something I remember and are used to with the age of the comics as well. Again, you wouldn't have it nowadays. There's, you know, a lot of female comic characters' outfits have been completely redesigned, and they wouldn't have the kind of. Yeah, they wouldn't have the skin on show and the poses and the broken backs and all this. You still do get it because people like cheesecake, people like the sexualized nature. Like, again, speaking of anime, that's, you know, there's a whole subsection of horny stuff going on in there, which I won't get into. You know, there's a deep hole you could fall into with that.
Put me off calamari for life.
Speaking of Marvel superheroes, Shuma Gorath, or was it Gargantos? I think they call him now because they don't have the rights to the Conan the Barbarian character. I was like, of course, Capcom have found a way to put a tentacled creature in their fighting game. Of course they have. But yes, was there before we come to a close? Is there any other kind of character moments or characters or things you'd like to mention about the book specifically? That you really enjoyed or didn't care for?
I think the stuff with the little bit of backstory with Blink and Sabretooth is quite touching. I mean, we touched on it earlier how weird it is to see Sabretooth being a noble guy. I mean, he even knows when he goes off on his own to fight Holocaust. He even says, I ain't going to survive this. I mean, obviously, whether he does or he doesn't, that's let people read it. Let people read it for themselves. But he's literally, in his mind anyway, it's a selfless suicide mission, and it's really weird to see the Victor Creed character be, because in this reality, a lot of the characters are very close to what they were pre-Age of Apocalypse. They're in a different situation, but the characterization isn't massively different from what it was pre the event that turned into this alternate timeline. They're just not in their normal habitat or normal surroundings. But this character is completely 180'd from what he was and will be afterwards when this whole issue is resolved. So I really like that. I think because it's just something different, isn't it? From being, you know, like you said, a lot of them are just, it's the same person. They're just in a shit situation, really. Gambit is Gambit. Yeah, there is no difference to the Gambit in this reality than Gambit as he was before and will be afterwards. Whereas Sabretooth is just, it's bonkers, and I really like that. I wish there was a bit more of that. You know, you could argue maybe Magneto's slightly softened by his domestic situation, maybe by finding love and having another child, despite obviously losing Wanda again at the hands of Holocaust. In the backstory, we never see it, but that's established in the world building. So I just think that's really nice writing, just something a bit different, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree.
So I mean, I kind of liked it because it subverted my expectations. But standing back from it, I kind of don't buy it, because in the 616, Sabretooth is such a bastard. He's not just a guy who's fallen on hard times. He is malicious. He is nasty. He will go out of his way to be sadistic. And so I have all of that cynicism when I'm coming into this miniseries, and that's why I think partly I'm thinking, okay, so Charles is dead, so certain things are going to splinter off in ways that
Sure.
you know, produce this universe or this world. But I couldn't help myself getting sort of pulled into it. I was like, oh, God, he's dead, you know, and oh no, and he like say Blink, and Blink's all upset and stuff. So even though I'm like, yeah, I don't buy it, because there's not just this one thing.
I will say, he does say Blink and him used to run with Holocaust, so they used to be on the wrong side of things. So they are trying to redeem themselves in a way. So he's not an angel. He's not an absolute angel. But I get what you mean.
He seems like an angel in this, doesn't he? I mean, he seems very chivalrous.
Is that not the love of Blink? You know, this very popular character, as you mentioned, the love of Blink. Did that affect him? You know,
questionable intentions there. He's quite a lot older than Blink.
Yeah. Also, well, Wolverine seems to have a lot of young girls kind of running after him, and you know,
I'm not sure how history, but
when
to
you're
me,
so slow, you're older than everyone, aren't you?
No.
True. I get what you mean though, because like Sabretooth was already a long-lived human or mutant before Xavier died, so he already had. And we know kind of from some other continuity and holes have been filled in over time that he was pretty despicable almost from the get-go. Yeah.
Now, for me, and I don't know, maybe it'll be explored in one of the other minis, but like Kane Marco, for me, I could buy him being like the Sabretooth character in here, because young Charles Xavier is a fucking dick. I think old Charles Xavier is a bit of a dick as well, but you look
strangled his twin in the womb.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like
there's so many bad things about Charles Xavier.
If we're gonna say Sabretooth was a bastard from the get-go, we've got to say Charles was a bastard from the very get-go.
So Kane Marco, Juggernaut, he is a character that I could say, okay, if things had worked out differently, he could have absolutely been, you know, what Sabretooth is in this story. But I'm missing something mentally where I can leap to, okay, he's this utterly despicable 616 character, but he's tremendously chivalrous, even though we know he's got a bit of a checkered past. He doesn't come across like a Han Solo, you know, a bit of a scoundrel, bit of a nerf herder. You know, he comes across just utterly chivalrous and heroic. You know, he knows he's going to his death, but it's for the greater good and all of that. So, again, that is more on the nitpicky side of things. But because, like I say, once I was into the story, I was like, okay, dude, I know this character now in this story, in this continuity, so I can go with it.
Yeah. I think some of the things I didn't quite like. I've been fairly positive about it, but the conversation that Magneto has with Bishop about, oh no, I don't think I can take a human life. Oh no, and I'm like, you arrived from your own. I was like, you arrived from your own dystopian future. You were part of a group of enforcers or policemen, effectively. You brandish a gun. You know, I'm pretty sure you've shot people. In the Cable book after Messiah Complex, which I think you've read, Dave, he wants to kill a baby to save the future. So, and he makes no qualms about that.
Yep.
Kills people then. So I felt that didn't quite work for me there, because he's like, in your world, Xavier thinks life is precious, and you know, I'm like, yeah, but it's not like you're on board with the X-Men, but I don't think you're like 100% on board, because in his future, like, Gambit betrays them, or seemingly betrays the X-Men. They all die apart from him, and that's why he has this antagonism with Gambit because he knows he's this rogue kind of thief and could betray them at any minute, has worked with Mr. Sinister in the past. So yeah, I didn't quite buy that whole like, oh, I'm so conflicted.
See, I almost 2000s onwards Bishop I almost treat like a different character.
Yeah,
the Bishop that was chasing Cable round to try and kill a baby is not the Bishop from here. No. They've just done him a real disservice, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 2 timelines in his head, or 2 or 3 maybe, or more, which is messing him up. That's why he's angry and aggressive and a bit weird and strange, and and he is slowly remembering things and stuff. So I can kind of understand that he's a bit confused, but I still don't think he would be like, no, killing is wrong.
Yeah.
I did like that we see baby Charles and Nanny. So we see what happens there. That she goes off and she ends up in the sewers that we see in the previous book in Externals. We find out how that occurs, and I like it's like obviously Initiative Armageddon, and that it was like apocalypse is coming. This is it. This is the Armageddon. That's what this is it. Which we will see. We'll see, guys. We'll get to that point. We'll get to that book. And there was a thing with Rogue as well. Like she, in this timeline, she's permanently absorbed Polaris's powers. So she has magnetic powers like Magneto. But it doesn't appear like that. It feels like she just has her regular Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers powers, Captain Marvel powers. But she does use them very briefly to kind of scramble Holocaust brain. But I was like, surely there's so much more you could be doing with those powers and Morph's powers and Sunfire's powers. Like, if you've got the opportunity, why not kind of use them? But it's kind of just she just keeps going back to kind of just punching and flying, which is fine. I've got no issue with it. But if you're going to make her absorb the abilities of Polaris, why don't you show those abilities and her using them, or a combination of all the characters? Like in the original Chris Claremont stuff, she'd absorb everybody's powers all at the same time and then attack and do stuff like that. But yeah, it just seemed strange to not use that opportunity. Again, something that makes her different from her regular 616 counterpart. Why don't you go a whole hog into it and go for it? And yeah, they don't really. They do one thing, and he goes, my brain! You scrambled my brain, and that's it. That's literally it. But that could have been anything though, because it doesn't kind of imply that it's magnetic or anything. It just goes, my brain, and that's it. So yeah. And speaking of bad writing, I think there was that moment as well, not far from the one you mentioned, Max, where they're like he's dancing around all the blast, all the kind of energy blasts that Holocaust is giving out. And he goes, I'm dodging, and I'm making fun of you, and I'm getting under your skin. And then he's like, oh wait, you just set me up for this building to collapse on me, didn't you? And he goes, yes, I did. The building collapses on Sabretooth. And I was like, kind of funny, kind of shit. I don't know. It was kind of like, oh, okay, kind of a bit groan-worthy. Not as groan-worthy as some of Morph's jokes and gags, but enough where I was like, oh, okay, all right, I see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But overall, I think this was a really strong entry in the ones we've looked at so far. Not that I think Gambit so far has been the weakest for me, but this one I think is just really bombastic, proper superhero action movie. Going on. It's great fun I've had with this one.
Yeah, me too. It's a ride, isn't it? It's a ride. It's definitely the one I've enjoyed the most. Like we've said over the past hour and a bit, there's some tonal mishmash things, and sometimes the humour does seem like it doesn't quite belong to the situation. But I think overall, I think it's a really good read, and it's just one you can pick up and go with. Doesn't require a huge amount of knowledge of the universe to pick up and read it. It's very easy to read, and they do fill in a lot of gaps while you're going along as well. There's a lot of rumination, like Magneto prior to being taken by Apocalypse, when he's left behind at the mansion, sort of ruminating on the situation, his interior monologue. So it does help to bring the reader up to speed as well. So I think overall, I think it's very, very good.
Yeah, I think it's been a very strong one. I do like the maniacal look he gives Apocalypse, proper like big horrible grin he gives him. And he's just like, a proper cheesy, cartoony. But I was like, nah, I'm here for it. Be the mad bastard that you are. I love it.
It's larger than life, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
If you want gritty realism, read The Dark Knight Returns, for God's sake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Dave. Gritty realism. Yeah, Dave. But, I mean, you've read Uncanny X-Force, which has a lot of connections, in fact, to the Age of Apocalypse. So I think rereading that now, knowing you've read this, I think you can see those connections. I think there is a character called Genocide, who is a version of Holocaust, I believe, in Uncanny X-Force, if I remember rightly, which is kind of another kind of son of Apocalypse situation. But yeah, if you don't remember, it might be worth revisit, or we could revisit it all together.
I don't,
maybe.
But at some point I would love to do that, and things like Necrotia. I think. Personally, I think, around that time, Necrotia, Messiah Complex, stuff like that was another golden time for really
Decimation,
great X-Men
House of M.
books. Yeah, just, and again, really tapping into, you could see there was an editorial push to reduce the number of mutants and whatever, because it had got a bit silly, but it just seemed to hit a sweet spot of all these great stories and these underlying themes. But I just, before we wrapped up, I wanted to highlight one of the other superpowers that Rogue has obviously developed in this universe, and it's the very, very last panel. And she has seemingly developed the superpower of gravity-defying breasts.
Fuck you now.
If you look at that very last panel, seriously, look, last panel.
I'll show it. It's going on screen now. It's going on screen.
Last panel of
Christ on a bike.
issue 4. I'm
Wait,
like,
Max is showing it as well.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I mean,
Oh dear, sexualization of the 90s. The 90s. We apologise for the 90s and the way the 90s were. We like to think they were more enlightened times, as Derek said recently on one of my podcasts, but they weren't quite there yet.
I think there was a lot wonderful about the 90s, but equality probably wasn't one of them. It's been so great coming along this journey, because, like I say, I know about the event. I know about the things that happen because of pop culture and everything that came after. But to actually go back to the event and actually walk through it, and you see, okay, this is how it was placed and evolved. So I'm not there yet, but 90s comics have been this black hole for me. Specific kind of events and things I'll seek out, like Infinity Gauntlet from the early 90s and stuff like that, but I just see some. I mean, let's face it, Rob Liefeld, right? He's the you put 90s comics and Rob Liefeld together, and there is nothing that makes you want to go back and read that stuff. So this is kind of, it's cracking the door open a little bit for me, and okay, I can. To understand where you are, you have to know where you've come from. So it's opening my eyes a little bit as well.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I think that was my main mission through this, is to and again, maybe at some point maybe me and Tony will get back on the Clone Saga, the Spider-Man Clone Saga train, possibly with another Tony as well. So yeah, we'll look at that. But I think there is good stuff in there. You just have to sift through a lot of shit, unfortunately. And unfortunately, it's what the audience wanted, or what the comic book industry thought the audience wanted. They were like, "Oh, Watchmen, the main, it's like Hollywood. They always learn the wrong lessons of what's popular."
There is a bit of footage. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere, but like there is Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld, and they're drawing these massive and these ridiculous over
guns
the top
and muscles and
I think it's
the character called Overkill, ironically.
Oh, really? And Stan Lee, and they're saying, "Oh, the kids love this," and Stan Lee's there. He's like, "Really?" Stan Lee's subtly sledging
they're going always
right
like,
there and then.
Like, oh, look at this, it's cool, and this is so cool, and this is so cool. It's like, yeah, but who is he? What is he?
Yeah.
What does he do? Where does he go?
It's just such a wonderful microcosm of like the problems with the 90s, because they went so far in the direction of the art, whereas Stan Lee, of course, he's going to disagree with that, because as far as he's concerned, it's all about the story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he didn't consider the artists co-creators for a very long time. As much as I love Stan Lee,
that's a tangent, isn't it? But
you know, and maybe he still didn't, but he gave them credit because I think people were like, you should maybe give them a little bit of credit.
Begrudgingly,
yeah, begrudgingly. Like Jack Kirby did draw the Silver Surfer.
Yeah, you know, and I sort of put some dialogue in
there. You know, as a creative engine as he was, you know, he's even the best will in the world. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do all of it. Anyway, create that massive universe all by himself and take credit for it. But there you have it. Anything else you want to say, Dave, before we finish? Because we know Max has got his bedtime coming up.
Again, just not to gush too much, but just loving the chat. Again, I kind of blitzed through this mini, and I was like, I don't like this as much. And again, I think it was partially not recognising the team. I think the artwork in Sunfire, I think his redesign was amazing. Yeah, I mean, a little bit stereotypical, having the old Japanese flag right in the middle, but it looked fucking cool, and he was the one character. Yeah.
I think they minimised because his previous costume was the whole flag, wasn't it? So in this they've kind of gone, let's kind of just condense that into the one thing, which doesn't necessarily say Japan, but also once you know the character, yes, it does.
So again, I'd almost love to not reimagine, but redo this mini-series. But do you see that there was a mini with the torch, the original John Hammond torch?
Yeah, Jim Hammond, sorry.
And they just the artwork was amazing, and the colouring and everything. I'd love to see Sunfire. This design of Sunfire in that kind of style, that would just be phenomenal.
It would be awesome.
Yeah, I think I kind of blitzed through the mini. It didn't land with me emotionally, but in talking through it, I can kind of, you know, the reflected joy that you guys have got from it, I can get that, and I can jive with that. So for me, I didn't enjoy it as much as the previous two, even Gambit and the Externals. But
strong words.
What's been great is to go through it and then kind of retrospectively think about it, and you know, I'll possibly go back and, you know,
reread it. Yeah, do it.
Reread it. Yeah,
do it. Right, well, that is it for us. So next time, we don't know when we're going to be recording next, because Max has a little baby Charles on the way. So whether Max isn't with us, whether we bring somebody else in, perhaps, for that recording, or we'll see what happens. But we want Max to be involved. It wouldn't be the same without Max in some form. Even if he's not involved, he can send us his thoughts or what have you. But we'll figure something out. But
we will get version of Max.
That's a good idea. A variant Max.
A variant. Less of a twat.
The one who did sleep with his mum. But next
less
time,
virile.
Moving on.
The age of insemination. So next time we will be looking at the UK-based Excalibur comic. So Excalibur becomes Excalibur. So we're going to look at that and Nightcrawler's mission to find his mother, and also Destiny, to prove the truth of what Bishop has been saying and what he remembers or believes to be true, the real world, before this cosmic accident, as he describes. But yes, thank you guys. This has been great talking again. Thank you for finding the time. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as well. It's been a blast. Tell us your thoughts. Tell us what you think. Do you agree more so with Dave or me and Max? Who knows? Start the discussion. And join us on the next chapter in the Page of Apocalypse.